Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Koobana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Kaihan, Bizarre Crimes That Shook Japan Volume 2 is now out. If you're interested in learning more about some of the most bizarre, strange, and even terrifying crimes that have taken place in Japan over the last few decades, then make sure to grab your copy now. You can find 25 new cases of missing persons, unsolved mysteries, and truly bizarre crimes that still confuse people today. That's Kaihan, Bizarre Crimes That Shook Japan Volume 2, out now. This week, we're heading to Kyushu for yet another stop on our ghastly tour around Japan. First up, two friends visit one of the most famous ghost spots not just in Fukuoka, but perhaps all of Japan. But what's really waiting for them there? Find out in Inunaki Ridge. Have you ever heard of Inunaki Ridge? I was going to make up a story, but then I remembered something I'd forgotten for a long time. Honestly, it's not that scary, but it did actually happen to me. I was a student at the time, and I was friends with someone by the name of A. After school, we always hung around and just chatted. We weren't in any clubs after all. At any rate, we both liked scary stories, so we often passed the time sharing them. Sometimes a few girls would join us, and we passed the time at school until the sun set. Soon, it was our final summer holidays before we had to get ready for exams. A and I were chatting as usual, but being the summer holidays and being depressed about upcoming exams, we decided we should do something. And so, we agreed to visit Inunaki Ridge at night. Inunaki Ridge is an extremely famous ghost spot in Kyushu, and all the grown-ups always said that it was so dangerous that you should never go near it. These days, it's sealed, so you can't enter. Whenever you pass through the tunnel there, something always happens. Honestly, I was oddly excited, but also kinda scared. Still, being so young, there was no way I could say that I was afraid. And I couldn't let my close friend A see me like that either. As the sun set behind him, A's face looked pitch black. We were students from the countryside without a license. As such, we met at the nearby local station. Then we just had to walk. There was also talk of a bus on the way. At any rate, the summer holidays began and the days were hot and humid. As the day drew closer, I found myself feeling restless. I called A numerous times, but sadly, it seemed he was perfectly fine and still wanted to go. At one point in the conversation, I suggested that we give up, but I can still hear the sound of his laughter in my ears. After that, I didn't call him until the day we agreed to go. There was no way I'd let him see how scared I was. And then the day arrived. The day we would part ways. It rained heavily the day before, but by that morning it had stopped. I lazed in bed until that evening, our agreed meeting time. As the time approached, I wanted to call A several times to call it off, but I couldn't. I left the house. "Why am I being punished?" I muttered. I had never been there before, so I made my way over after asking the station staff for help. It was already getting dark by that point. There was a light drizzle, but even with an umbrella, I still got wet. I arrived at the station 30 minutes ahead of schedule, and nobody else was there. The station staff had also returned to the office, leaving me alone. It was summer, but I still shivered from being wet. Honestly, I think I was just afraid. Then the time we agreed to meet came and passed. A still wasn't there. Maybe he's on the next train, I thought, and waited some more. But still there was no sign of him. That idiot, I thought, but honestly I was relieved. I thought I could finally go home. However, being just a kid, I was also angry at being stood up. I'm gonna punch that guy next time I see him. But then I heard a voice behind me. I turned around, and A looked angry. You! How long were you planning on making me wait for? You said we were gonna meet here. Huh? The station? Are you seriously telling me you've been waiting at the Ridge all this time? Sorry. A was still upset, no doubt because he'd been waiting alone all that time. But either way, we quickly set off. I hurried along behind him. He'd already been there once, so he showed me the way. But he was still upset and didn't say anything. His face also seemed somewhat pale. Eventually, we reached the Ridge, but once we got there, it turned into a sudden gravel path. In the dim light, I struggled to keep up with A, but then I noticed an iron fence up ahead. We were just young kids. I picked up a large rock from the ground and tried to break the padlock keeping the iron fence shut. A wasn't very strong, so that was my job. It took a while, but finally it broke. Seemed it was a pretty old lock. Then we followed the wideish path that seemed to cut through the thick brush on either side. Maybe it was because of the rain, but the sun was already gone. We followed the path with our torches. After climbing for about 30 minutes, we came across a tunnel that looked like it had been painted even blacker than the darkness. Inside was also pitch black. I'd never seen anything so dark before. A chill ran down my spine. "This is it," A said, his voice trembling. "It wasn't this dark when I was waiting here before, though." We huddled together and looked inside. It was as though it led straight to hell itself. If we had come during the day, then we would have been able to see the light on the other side, but for some reason, it looked like a tunnel without end at night. I wonder what'll happen once we reach the other side. A had been silent the whole time, but now he was clutching my clothes. "Hey, you go first," he said to me. "Idiot! Stop pushing me!" We were on a silent mountain at night. Perhaps because of the rain, we couldn't even hear any insects. The only light we had was that of our torches, but that also seemed to melt into the darkness. I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't simply just scared. Honestly, I wanted to cry. I turned to A. "I'm sorry, I can't. Let's get out of here." But A continued holding me. "Idiot! We came all this way. You really want to go home now?" He then pushed me forward a little. "I told you, I can't. I can't do this anymore. Think about how I felt, waiting here all by myself for you." "I already told you, I'm leaving." "No." A then pulled me into the tunnel so hard that my clothes almost tore, but I stood my ground. "Stop it! Just shut up and come. Now!" A pulled me further into the tunnel. Exhausted, I pulled back against him, trying to shake him off. I was stronger than him after all. But A seemed stronger than usual, and I couldn't. "It's fine. There's nothing to be scared of. Let's go together." At that point, I realized something. Wait, you waited for me here? He remained silent. But that iron fence on the way was locked. He still didn't say anything. I mean, I got to the station 30 minutes early, and you said you were waiting all that time. Just how long were you waiting? It was then that I realized that it wasn't just A pulling me into the tunnel. From behind and to the side, numerous hands were pulling me further in. I screamed and A turned around to look at me. It's time to die, man. Apparently I passed out after that, and a local found me while they were out picking wild vegetables. I was laid up for several days with a terrible fever. While I was at the hospital, I found out that A had been so scared that he didn't even go out that day. And after that, I never spoke to him again. The kids in this next story explore an abandoned temple at the top of a mountain, but while there, they find something that perhaps doesn't want them to leave. Find out why in Scroll in the Abandoned Temple. When I was a child, I lived in a village in Oita Prefecture. This village was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but mountains and dense forest. There was a forest path that extended from the front of the village, and if you followed it, it led to a fork on the mountain. There, if you followed it even further, it would lead you to a small abandoned temple on top of the mountain. The temple was badly damaged and kind of creepy, so not even the curious children played there. However, one day I decided to explore it with a few of my friends. It was a simple building. There was a room in the middle, and then a hall that went around it. That was it. We entered from the dirt floor, went down the hall, and after turning right twice, we reached the room. However, nobody was looking after the temple, so it was empty and covered in dust. The only thing in the room was a hanging scroll of a gloomy woman on the wall. We decided to take it home as something to remember our visit by. As we went to leave, we turned left twice down the hall, but we were unable to find the dirt floor area we entered from. Huh? I thought. We kept walking and turning left, but still we couldn't find the exit. All the blood drained from our faces. We all started running, but around and around we went, and still there was no exit. Suddenly, the kid holding the hanging scroll screamed and threw it. That woman who looked so sad earlier was now smiling brightly. "We have to put the scroll back where we found it," said the oldest kid. I no longer even felt alive, and I certainly didn't want to go back to that room. But the calmest kid picked up the creepy scroll, making sure not to touch the picture on it, went back into the room, hung it up, and then returned to the hall. We turned left, and then we turned left again. And there was the dirt floor exit. The summer sun beamed straight onto it. We screamed, no idea what was going on, as we ran outside. And after that, we never went back near that temple again. A son meets a strange friend of his father's when they return home for a party. He has a rather unique nickname that suits him quite well. But who, or perhaps what, is he really? Find out in Big Mouth Yacht-chan. This happened one summer over 10 years ago, when I returned with my father to his family home. My father's hometown is in the mountains of Kyushu. The areas surrounding the village are nothing but lush greenery and rice paddies as far as the eye can see. One night, my father was having a drinking party with some relatives, locals, and old friends, when another guest arrived. "Hey, I heard you were back," he said. "Oh, Big Mouth Yot-chan, how have you been?" My father slapped the guy on the shoulder like they were old friends. Like his nickname, he really did have a big mouth. His features were pointed, like an inverted triangle, and he had a big, thin mouth with vivid laugh lines. He gave off a sharp image, like a Westerner, but he was small in stature. "Son, this is my friend from elementary school, Yoshihiko-san. We call him Big Mouth Yot-chan." "Nice to meet you, sir." "Huh, he looks just like you." "Nice to meet you. I'm Big Mouth Yot-chan." "He's small, but he's got a big mouth, haha." "Ah, shut up." And so the drinking party continued with Big Mouth Yot-chan. Because he was late to the party, I found myself looking at him more, and he really did have strange facial features. A small, sharp nose, large pupils the colour of egg yolk, big ears. He really didn't look Japanese at all. But having said that, it was hard to tell what ethnicity he was. His features were just that strange. And that large, thin mouth he had that gave him his nickname really was big. He seemed frail, yet ferocious. That was the impression I got from him. After a while, Big Mouth Yot-chan left, saying he had an early start the next morning. And with that, more and more people also took their leave, and in the end, only a few old friends and the homeowner's great aunt remained. In this comfortable atmosphere, one of my father's friends then turned to me. "Hey kiddo, Big Mouth Yot-chan's a bit odd, isn't he?" he said. "Stop that!" The great aunt tried to stop him, but he continued. "That guy isn't human, you know." For a while, everyone fell oddly silent. Then the friend continued. "He told me that when he went to the dentist said he'd never seen teeth like that before." The story went like this. When they were all kids, a childhood friend of theirs died of illness. His father was a bum who disappeared before he was born, and the mother lost her mind after her child's death, so she threw herself into a pond on the outskirts of the village. A passerby rescued her, but they feared she might try it again. And so the great aunt, who was friends with her, stayed at her house to look after her. One night, the great aunt sensed something strange and woke up. In front of the house, she found a sleeping baby covered in mud. That pond the mother threw herself in was called such and such pond, and it was thought that a kami-sama lived there. The baby didn't look quite human. They suspected that the kami-sama of the pond felt bad for the mother, and so gave her a child. At any rate, they went to the police the next day, but they never found the real parents. The baby was taken to a home for a while, but then they let the mother officially adopt him. That baby was Big Mouth Yot-chan. People often made fun of him for his strange appearance, but Yot-chan was naturally mischievous, so people quickly got used to him. And these days, he held an important post at the agricultural cooperative, and he had a wife and daughter as well. He's our longtime friend, so we don't really care about it. But that guy probably has the blood of that kami-sama in his veins, my father muttered, with a distant look in his eyes. Either way, Yot-chan is Yot-chan, leave it at that." The great aunt got angry at them. And just like that, the drinking party was over. Even now, we receive a New Year's card from Big Mouth Yacht-chan every year. Seems he now has a grandchild as well, and is beyond happy. I'm not very familiar with Kyushu dialect, so I reproduced it the best I could. I also changed some names and such so as to prevent some people from being exposed. But if you look at Yacht-chan closely in passing, you might not realize it's him and just think that he has a big mouth. A boy shares 2 tales from an island just off the coast in Oita Prefecture, from his grandmother and great-grandfather, that seems to hint of something otherworldly living in their village. But what exactly is it? Find out in The Child. I'm from Oita Prefecture, and this story happened to my great-grandfather during the early Showa period on a small nearby island. One night, my great-grandfather was on his way home after the village meeting. He had to follow the mountain path to go home, and on the way, there was a small temple. There had long been rumours of a ghost in the area surrounding that temple, but my great-grandfather was a fisherman and confident in his own strength. So apparently he feared nothing as he walked in the darkness with nothing but a small lamp. When he finally saw the stone fence of the temple, suddenly a small child toddled past him. "Hey, where are you from?" he asked. But suddenly the child was gone. Looking around, he saw the child was now behind him. "What a strange kid," he thought. But as he tried to get a closer look, again, the child was gone. Confused, he started walking again, but now the child was in front of him. "Hey you!" He tried to chase after him, but again, the child was now walking behind him. To his surprise, this continued for the next 50 meters or so, with the kid appearing in front of him and then behind him, over and over. Then, as the lights of the village came into view, the child disappeared, just like that. My great-grandfather didn't drink, so his story was oddly persuasive once the villagers heard it, and it quickly spread. "It must have been something from the temple," he said. On that island, they apparently called this creature Sekonoko, and there were rumours that it was something akin to a kappa. This next story happened to my grandmother on that same island during the war. At the time, there was no end to the fighting in sight, and food was scarce, so they grew potatoes and such on the mountains there. One day, my grandmother went to a nearby mountain with a friend. The path up was winding, like a spiral staircase, but much wider. I wonder if it makes sense riding it like that. They were talking as they walked, and after they'd gone up roughly 2 levels, they saw something walking ahead of them. It was a child with brown hair, walking at around the same speed as them. However, they couldn't see their face because of all the plants, so from their position below, all they could see was the child's head. "There's a strange kid up there," her friend said. "You can see them, right?" "Yeah, I can," my grandmother replied. "What's with that hair colour? And they're not even wearing a hat on a hot day like this. I wonder where they're from," they said as they kept walking. "Let's go see," my grandmother finally said, and they tried to catch up to the child, but when they moved faster, so did the kid, so they weren't able to catch up. The top of that mountain was flat, however, so they thought that once they got there, they'd be able to see. But once they got there, the child was gone. At the time, it was said villagers often saw such strange things on particularly hot days on the island. In this next story, a man visits Kyushu for a holiday to take some photos, but while at the guest house, he encounters something quite odd, and perhaps not of this world. But what's the sad story behind this one? Find out in Helper. Looks like not a lot is happening right now, so let me share my story. I enjoy taking photos, particularly of landscapes and such, so when I have some time off, I like to travel. This is something that happened when I stayed at a guest house one time. So on this particular day, I was in Kyushu, but the weather was so bad that I couldn't really take photos. So in the evening, I returned to the guest house I was staying in. The people who ran it were great hosts, and I was very satisfied with the place. I had dinner, then I looked out over the view of the back garden from my room, with a beer in hand. That night, the weather got a little better. Then I heard the sliding door opening behind me. I turned around, but nobody was there. Instead, there was a tray with a teacup on it. I thought it was strange they didn't knock or call out, but I thought maybe they were just being considerate of me. I picked up the teacup, but it was just full of hot water, not tea. It seemed a little odd, but regardless, I drank it all and then had a bath. The guest house had baths both indoors and outdoors, and while I was relaxing in the outdoor hinoki tub, looking at the scenery, again, I heard that sound of something being placed behind me. I turned around, and again, nobody was there. Just that tray and teacup. And again, it was just full of hot water. What a strange service for a guest house, I thought. I hadn't heard anything about them being proud of their water, and while I couldn't understand it, they were still looking after my comfort. So, when in Rome, as they say, I drank the hot water again and then finished my bath. I had to get up early the next day, so I went to bed early. But I woke up that night needing to use the toilet, so, rubbing my eyes, I opened the sliding door and kicked something. Whatever it was, it tipped over. It was a teacup. But there wasn't just one teacup. There were more than 10 of them, placed randomly all over the floor. Naturally, this wasn't normal, and I was now too creeped out to go to the toilet. I got back into bed, but the sound of something being placed on the floor continued. As soon as it got light the next morning, I got out of bed, opened the sliding door, and there was undoubtedly even more teacups compared to the night before. I immediately asked the couple who ran the guest house about the teacups, and they told me the following story. Apparently, that couple had a son, but he died the year before. He had a slight disability, and although he couldn't help around the house, he was an incredibly kind child who said he wanted to help. So he used to serve guests tea. However, he often forgot to put the tea leaves in, which led to customers complaining they just got hot water. Hearing that, his parents got upset and stopped him from helping. But then, right after that, with nothing to do, the boy was walking around near the cliff in the back garden when he felt dizzy and fell. He was immediately rushed to the hospital, but his body was badly beaten and he never woke up. In the end, when he was in no state to speak, his parents said they heard one last thing from him. "I'm sorry I couldn't do anything. I'm sorry." He's probably still here trying to help, they said. I went to the family altar and stood before it. "Thank you for the tea. It was delicious," I said, and then I left. Nothing happened after that, and it was the only scary, yet sad, experience I ever had like that. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read my poor writing. The narrator of this next story shares some experiences their grandmother has had over the years. Their grandmother can see ghosts, but it's important they don't realize that. Find out why in Seeing Ghosts. This is a story about my grandmother. My grandmother is a strange person, and long ago, she used to say something to just me. "I can see ghosts, but you mustn't tell anyone." It's not like I've ever seen ghosts myself, so her stories left a real impression on me. Apparently, she first started seeing ghosts once she was a little older, around 15 years old. She lived in Fukuoka at the time, and she first started seeing them after the air raids. Once the raids were over, everything around her had been burnt to a crisp. My grandmother lost both her parents in the attack, and as she was wandering around, thinking about what to do, she noticed a man with terrible injuries. She rushed over to him, but his injuries didn't seem like he'd live much longer. Both his arms were gone, and his head had been badly injured as well. "It hurts! It hurts! Mother! Father!" the man cried. My grandmother tried to grab him, but for some reason she couldn't. She then spoke to him, but he didn't respond, so she quickly grew afraid and then ran away. And from that day on, my grandmother said she could see ghosts. At first, she said it was hell, looking outside and seeing people bleeding everywhere, writhing in pain, burnt, screaming for help, or even walking around without their head. After the raids, she was able to find some relatives to move in with, but she still continued to see ghosts. However, she couldn't tell her family about that, because they would quickly treat her like a madman. My grandmother is a strong woman, however, and gradually she got used to seeing the ghosts. Even if they don't have legs or they're missing a head, she said she's not afraid anymore. She also said that if you pretend not to see them, then they won't really bother you. But if you accidentally get too close, it's dangerous. Apparently, that first ghost she saw with the head injury followed her around for quite some time. One day, she said she was walking around the streets of Oita when she saw a boy she used to know. He lived nearby when they were kids and they often played together, but he was supposed to be dead. Both his arms were missing and he was painful to look at. "Hey!" he cried out happily when he saw my grandmother. But she was starting to feel scared of ghosts at the time, so she pretended not to see or hear him. Whenever she passed that area, he always called out to her, but she never replied. "It's been a while since I first started seeing ghosts, but that boy is no doubt still there," she said sadly. A diver off the coast of Miyazaki Prefecture encounters something strange in the water. Something that, it seems, has a long-lasting effect on him. Find out why in Mermaid. My grandfather on my mother's side went swimming in the ocean behind Udo Shrine in Miyazaki Prefecture one time. an area you're not allowed to enter. As he was diving, he said he saw a mermaid. The seaweed blocking his view in the water was apparently her hair, but behind that was a beautiful pale face smiling at him. After that experience, my grandfather immediately gave up diving, despite being an expert hand at it. He wondered if maybe what he'd encountered was actually a drowned body, but he wanted to believe that it was a mermaid. By the way, after he saw that mermaid, my grandfather apparently became incredibly popular with the girls. It ended up making my grandmother's life a lot more difficult. I wonder if he received some sort of magical powers from that mermaid. Finally this week, a young man shares a story he heard from his grandfather during his days as a fisherman around Kagoshima. The sea is dotted with all sorts of uninhabited islands, at least until one man takes up residence on one. But is he truly alone there? Find out in Uninhabited Island. This is a story I heard from my late grandfather when he was drunk at a memorial service one time. When my grandfather was young, he worked as a fisherman in Kagoshima. He set out every day on a veteran's boat. The sea around that area was full of uninhabited islands, and there was a legend that pirates had hidden treasure on one of them long ago. It's hard to imagine now, but half a century ago, quite a few people actually believed those stories. When one magazine printed a story about it, suddenly the area was full of treasure hunters, and that island sprang to life. It died down after a few years, but one man decided to stick around and live on that island. That man's name was Gensan, and he was around 50 years old. He was small but tough, and at a glance appeared difficult to approach, but he got along well with all the local fishermen. He was also friendly with Koji-san, who was my grandfather's boss, and whenever they passed by his island on their fishing boat, they would wave to Gensan as he sat in his shabby hut on the beach. 2 years after Gensan started living there, something strange happened. It was the beginning of spring, and the fishing boat was passing by the island around sunset after finishing for the day. Koji-san was the first to notice that there was no light on in the hut. It was still too early for Gensan to be asleep, and at this hour they should have been able to see a light. Maybe he went to bed early, but something didn't feel right. Koji-san said they were going to go over to check it out. When they got close to the shore, my grandfather remained on the boat, while Koji-san got in a smaller one and made his way over to the island. About 20 minutes later, my grandfather heard screams coming from the island. Panicking, he looked towards the shore, and he saw what looked like Koji-san frantically waving a torch around. He was worried that something might have happened, but all he could do was wait where he was. Another hour or so passed, and then the small boat returned. Both Koji-san and Gensan were on it, and both were pale and covered in sweat. Koji-san in particular was shaking a lot, and when my grandfather asked him what happened, Koji-san just screamed at him to get the boat going. When they safely arrived back at the harbour, they went into the union office, and once Koji-san had calmed down, he started telling my grandfather what happened. When Koji-san approached the hut, he heard something groaning. Thinking that maybe Gensan had injured himself, he opened the door and looked inside. Pointing his torch to the rear left, he saw something strange there. Something black and shiny was on the bed, and Gensan was struggling beneath it. Koji-san screamed before he could stop himself and dropped the torch. Then the slimy thing made a strange sound before it went out the window above the bed. It slithered out, just like a snake. Picking up the torch, Koji-san then ran over to the bed. His eyes shut tight. Gen-san was groaning in pain, with his arms and legs stuck in the air as though he was paralyzed. Koji-san violently shook him, and he opened his eyes, but they were unfocused. Even so, he still helped him up and then got him on the boat. By the time he was done talking, Gen-san had come back too, but he didn't seem to understand what was going on. All he remembered was suffering from sleep paralysis or something, and then Koji-san waking him up. That night, Gen-san stayed in the office, and then returned to the island the next day. Koji-san and my grandfather suggested he leave the island for good, which he agreed to, and after gathering up his things and cleaning up his mess, they agreed to pick him up the following day. But when they arrived the next day, Gen-san refused to leave. He insisted he was just tired, and what Koji-san saw was nothing more than an illusion. His tone was violent, and his eyes had changed color, so Koji-san gave up in defeat and got back on the boat alone. Gen-san lived alone on the island for another 6 months after that, but then one day, he suddenly disappeared. The fishermen all looked for him, but they were unable to find him. They decided he must have drowned. But for a while after that, my grandfather and Koji-san kept looking for Gen-san whenever they passed the island. Over time, they didn't like seeing his hut falling apart more and more, however, so they decided to take a different route. According to my grandfather, the way they thought about it also changed from "where could he be" to "what will we do if he's still there?" He wondered if maybe they might see something that looked like Gen-san, but was actually now something entirely different. Sometimes they spoke about what Koji-san saw on the island after that, and one time Koji-san said, "Come to think of it, the moment I shone my light on it, for just a second, I saw a leg that split into 5 parts at the end." A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Just Sawn and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kaihan, Bizarre Crimes That Shook Japan Volume 2, out on Amazon right now. And check out our merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.